When Season 2 was announced, all the hype was around who the new Descendants would be, the new modes, and new weapons right for us to play with. Then we heard about the changes coming to a couple existing characters, and after seeing what Freyna got, it's safe to say a few people started to wonder what we might see. And while I will be revisiting Luna soon and finishing my Sharon setups for your viewing, instead we'll be diving into this video with the brand new queen of DPS herself, Viessa. So in this video we'll be looking at what modules make up Viessa's best set for content right now, what gear you'll need to be able to get the most out of her, and lastly, what kind of changes to make if you wish to use her for Colossus fights. But with all that out of the way though, let's get to it. As we always do, let's start over with our modules section. Let's start talking about Transcendence mods. Now there are two that are normally kind of like mainstays when it comes to talking about Viessa in terms of like general mobbing and being able to be all-round DPS goodness. One is going to be Cold-Bloodedness. Now the reason why we haven't gone for Cold-Bloodedness this time is one, I do absolutely love it and did use it in a previous guide. The main thing kind of revolves around you activating your skill 2 to be able to get that buff. Now, the buff that it does give you is fantastic, giving you cooldown reduction and MP cost reduction and being able to boost up your skill power. It really is a great buff. The only downside to it from my perspective is the fact that if this runs out, if you don't activate this constantly, if you run out of MP, you're kind of doing nothing. It doesn't affect anything else to do with your skills. There is just no point to that kind of mod just existing. So the reason why I'm going to take that one off is so I can put on Absolute Zero. Now this one comes with a multitude of buffs. This is just kind of crazy as to what a mod can kind of do. Obviously, we've got things where it changes every single skill to a singular, so that's fantastic when it comes to reactor side of things. We only need to find one reactor that boosts up everything, rather than being able to have something that has fusion, and deciding if we want fusion or tech to be able to boost up our ultimate, or if we want to boost up our skill 1 and 3. So there is that kind of decision that has to go into with Cold-Bloodedness, but we don't have to do that with Absolute Zero because everything is singular. On top of that, it does boost up some of the power of some of your other mods, which or some of your other skills, which is pretty much great across the board. Being able to smack for even harder is fantastic. It should just pretty much just exist just as a red mod by itself. But the main kind of like gimmick for this is the fact that in the passive you get a skill critical hit rate increase of 20%. Now we don't have to trigger this or anything like that, we just get this as standard. So if I take this off and then just head here, you can see we have 15%, but if I then go into here, put on Absolute Zero, and then go to the same screen, we're now at 35%. The main thing with this is because it is base critical hit rate, that means it is affected by every single critical hit kind of mod. So for example, we will be going into crits with this build. So just to help you out here, if I put on this skill Insight, which will be a mainstay in the build, and I just pop that in right here, and it gives us 115.4%. You would have thought that would have been 115.4% off the 15, but in actual fact, it gives us 75.39% because it goes off the 35. It's kind of nutty as to how good this mod is, and it really does enable being able to get to that 100% critical hit rate, and it doesn't need anything like Blue Beetle to be able to get that trigger. So let's start talking about the rest of the skills and being able to go into the rest of the mods that kind of round out the rest of this build, and then we'll talk about how good this is and then talk about what we can do for Colossus fights. So because it is a skill-based build, we will be needing cooldown. The first two mods that we should always be putting in is going to be Nimble Fingers and MP Conversion. This gives us a massive amount of skill cooldown, allows us to be able to get down to 2.7 seconds and 7.6 seconds respectively for our skill 1 and our skill 3. But we're not actually done there because we will be using Focus on Chill. This is going to give us a huge amount of chill skill power, so we boost up the amount of damage our abilities are doing, but on top of that we go down to a 2.2 second and a 6.4 second recharge when it comes to our skill 1 and skill 3. So this is really kind of like nice. It gives us some a little bit of like help when it comes to like a skill rotation out and about, and I do think this is the best kind of combination to be able to kind of achieve that. There are other ways that we can get more skill cooldown, which we will be talking about a little bit later in this build. But in terms of modifiers, in terms of like the actual modules and everything like that, that's essentially all we need. Now we do need a little bit of survival, so we will be grabbing a HP up. So we're grabbing our increased HP. We go for this one instead of Stim Accelerant because we don't want to hurt our MP anymore. We kind of need our MP to chuck out our abilities, so we're not going to be hurting that any more than we already have. We are going to be finishing off the rest of the crit package, so in this case we are going to be grabbing our skill concentration for our damage, emergency measures and front lines to be able to give us damage as well as our critical finish off our critical hit rate. Those in combination allow us to get up to that 100% critical hit rate. Technically it is overcapping us, Technically, because you can take off front lines to be able to go for chill integration, but if you do that, you will go down to around about 98%, so it's still fairly consistent, but in terms of like damage, it pretty much equals out, it pretty much kind of comes to the same, so I'd rather just kind of go up to that 100% rather than leave it up to chance and have a 2% chance of not actually hitting it. So we still have 2 more modules for us to kind of like cover, because we are going to be wanting to hit enemies as much as possible. We do go for a skill expansion so that we have some range into our abilities, and technically you could make an argument, because we do have another 50% for us to kind of hit that cap. You could say an amplification control would be enough for us to actually be able to hit everyone, just anyone that we kind of need it to be able to do. Like I said, 24.4 meters in terms of range, in terms of distance is fantastic on your skill 3, but I feel like it kind of leaves us a little bit short in some kind of area. So you could definitely make an argument for that. So this is going to be a little bit more of a flex spot. So if you want to go for amplification control, by all means feel free to go for that. But the one that really kind of worked for me was actually going to be spear and shield. This gives us a massive amount of defense, but it also gives us base skill power, and it opens up the fact that we do have multiple buckets now, because we have chill skill power and generic skill power, and those two in combination are going to give us more damage, because we actually have that kind of like combination of buckets. So we now have a decent defense stat. It's not fantastic, but it is still something that's going to help us. We are going to stay a little bit more upright because of that, and we are going to be chucking out a lot of damage. So if we go and like summarize this all up, you can see as to like what we actually are going to be getting. 100% critical hit rate, just shy of a 4x multiplier on that skill critical hit damage, and then our skill cooldown, and then everything like that. Now, if you wanted to be able to swap a couple of things over, if you wanted to go into a Colossus fight, I would recommend this one for the brand new boss that did get dropped, the Infernal. If you want to be able to go for that, this gives you the most consistent way of being able to actually dish out a bunch of damage. But if you are going against a normal or a hard Colossus instead, I would definitely go for Dangerous Ambush in place of Spear and Shield. The reason why I don't want to recommend Dangerous Ambush for the brand new one is because you won't be knocking them over as often, you won't be making them stumbled, you won't be immobilizing them, and they're always going to be targeting you because you're going into what I assume you are going into a private kind of match. If you are going into public, feel free to be able to actually get the benefit of that 24.9, but if you do go into private matches, you will essentially get no benefit from this pretty much like 99% of the time that you're in there, so it makes more sense to go for Spear and Shield, which is going to give you survival as well as an increase to your base damage that you will be casting out with every single one of your abilities. So that wraps it up on the modules, so let's start talking about gear. Now we'll start off with our Reactor. You can see that we have gone for a frozen singularity because every single one of our abilities has now been changed to singular, so that means that we can go for chill singular. And then when it comes to the ratios and the rolls at the bottom of this, I do think I've got the God roll in terms of chill skill power boost ratio as well as skill critical hit damage. Now we don't need critical hit rate because obviously we're already hitting that 100% cap, but you can go for a singular power boost ratio if you can't get chill. That's absolutely fine. In terms of like other roles, you could make an argument for cooldown as well as range, but to be completely honest with you, you would be sacrificing DPS to be able to go for these, whereas this will actually give you the most amount of DPS that you can crank out, so I do think this is the best in slot. Now, we will be talking about mountings a little bit later in the weaponry side of things. Just know that there's a reason why I have both of these. I do absolutely think these are the two best ones that you can actually go for when it comes to this build, but like I said, there'll be more information a little bit later on in the video. Now, components-wise, we have gone for a 4-piece into Slayer. This is going to maximise the amount of DPS that we can chuck out. It's the best for any kind of like skill-based build. The only downside is obviously that 15% into our skill cost, but getting that 26.1% skill power is going to go into that extra bucket along with the Spear and Shield, and it's really going to kind of like give us some nice kind of damage numbers. So I do think if you're looking to maximise DPS, this is the best shout. I will say, and just as a caveat, this is more than enough when it comes to mobbing. In fact, this is probably excessive when it comes to just generic kind of mobbing. So if you're doing things like defense missions, if you're just kind of like running through some of them like normal like 100% and 250% missions, then you don't necessarily need this. But if you are going into like 400%, if you are going into the brand new kind of content where you have a boss at the end, if you have some stubborn targets, then Slayer is going to be the best one. It's also going to be the best for Colossus fights. But if you are looking for something a little bit different, if you don't want to go into Slayer, if you feel like this is too much kind of like DPS or too much skill power to be able to chuck out with one single cast, then I would then recommend the brand new set, which is going to be Hunter. I do think this is still a fantastic set. I don't agree with most of the roles that do exist on these ones, because you only have 1 HP, you have 2 shields and 1 defense. I don't think it's very good in that kind of sense, but in terms of like the utility that it offers with the skill cooldown, fantastic. In terms of the MP recovery, fantastic. This is going to be a really good set, a really nice thing to be able to put onto the majority of kind of extended fights when it comes to skill-based descendants. So I do think being able to get that extra MP back is going to be definitely worthwhile. So I'm still trying to farm for my god rolls when it comes to this, but I do have a couple of nice ones. So therefore, if you don't want to go Slayer, if you just want to be able to have something that gives you consistency in terms of like keeping you upright, in terms of allowing your skills to still be there ready for when you actually need them, then Hunter is definitely going to be the next best in slot. So now we've reached the weaponry side of things, and there's only 2 things that I would actually suggest in this kind of slot. One is going to be increasing the amount of DPS that you will be chucking out. The other one is kind of like a weapon that you can fall back on, just in case your skills are all on cooldown, or if you're waiting for some of your mana to be able to come back. So let's start talking about the one that's going to be increasing DPS, and that's going to be the Frost Watcher. So if we head over to the unique ability, we can start talking about why that is. Primarily, this was kind of advertised as like a Haley weapon, but the reason why this works so nicely on Viessa is the fact that you can get Sub-Zero Sensation, and this will give you a massive 32% increase to your chill skill power. To be able to get this though, you do need to be able to aim for weak points. You do need to be able to do this from 12.5 meters away or more, and then it will give you a chance of being able to get this, and being able to get this and then being able to cast out your skill 1 or your skill 3, you'll essentially just hit ridiculously hard. Your skill 3 potentially could even wipe out a full bar of an elite or a slasher or a boss with this, and definitely is a great shout for being able to go into Colossus fights, because you can actually aim for some of the weak points, be able to get this, and then just go to town with your skill 4 as well as your skill 3, and you will essentially just chunk away their health bar. Is fantastic if you can get this buff. So this is definitely going to be the best in slot for that. If you want a build for this, you can kind of copy what I currently have. I haven't invested very much into this, but the main reason why I've gone for all these kind of things is to go for increases to my firearm attack. I've then gone for fire rate up so I can have better follow-up shots to be able to try and get that weak point. Because we are aiming for weak points, I've also gone for weak point damage here. But the main kind of like thing to be able to shine here is actually going to be Defense Master, because being able to have this on a weapon that you're not necessarily using to be able to shoot, you're still able to trigger this mod. It will essentially give you a way of being able to boost up your survival while you're out and about. It does have a 5-second window where it doesn't actually trigger, it doesn't actually give you any kind of benefit, but for the other 10 seconds it is fantastic. Being able to go from 17k defense up to the 20 to the 30 kind of k kind of region, just for being able to actually have this weapon equipped, is just kind of nutty to me. It's just definitely worthwhile. It is definitely one of the better kind of like survival mods to exist, and because we aren't using this for generic kind of play, you might as well just kind of like slot that one right in there. Now the other weapon that I will recommend is going to be one I've recently done a video on, which is going to be the Voltier. This is going to be the same kind of build that I've been rocking with. Essentially you can use this one for the brand new season content to be able to pop shields. It's also great as a mobbing tool as well, because you can, if your skills are ever on cooldown or if you run out of MP, you can then fall back on this gun to be able to deal with the crowd that exists in front of you. It is a fantastic kind of like DPS machine. It really does kind of like chuck it out. So if you need to see a build, you can see it here. If you want a full explanation as to why everything is the way it is for that, then you can definitely go check out this video that is pinned in the comment section down below, but also exists on the item card in the top right now. But that's essentially all I'm going to say with this one. It is a fantastic mobbing weapon, and I definitely would recommend it as kind of like a fallback. You can have this as a mounting so that you can always still use your guns as well as your skills to be able to complement for like those shield sections. So that's the reason why I've put both of them on this reactor right now. Now there is one last section I do want to talk about, and that's going to be the Inversion Reinforcement. There are a couple of nodes here that I don't think people tend to talk about too much, but I do still want to be able to cover in this video, because that gives you all the information you essentially need to do to be able to start cranking out the numbers that you can see in front of you. Now, in terms of the best ones that I would recommend, my main current like loadout is going to be Neuro Concentration. This is going to increase our MP, but it's also going to increase the modifier of our MP recovery. It's not a huge amount, but it was helping me more than what the HP was kind of giving me, so I do think that this is probably best in slot for that. I was going for Antibody Explosion. This was giving us some all attribute resistance, which was kind of helping us with durability for being able to stay upright in a fight. So I do think this is one of the better kind of like survival kind of mods, but that's the one I've essentially gone for with this. And then lastly, I've also gone for the seasonal kind of tree here, and I've grabbed Arcade Boost. This one is fantastic for all kind of skill-based descendants. In this case, hitting 5 or more enemies with a skill, which you can easily do with what Viessa actually packs in her arsenal. It gives you the Arcade Boost buff. This one reduces your skill cooldowns by 15.5%, and it also increases your speed and range on your skill 1 by 11% for 7 seconds. It's not a huge boost. I wish it lasted a little bit longer, but what it does actually give you is fantastic. And once you've actually completed this full tree, you then on top of that get Quantum Domain, which is another buff that goes on top of it, which doesn't decay. It does actually every single time you cast a skill go all the way up to 15, and this increases your effect range, so this is going to help us out with hitting even more enemies for our skill 1, skill 3 and skill 4, and on top of that it increases our generic skill power as well as we go through, so we'll be doing even more damage and you'll start to see those crits start to rise. Phew, and with all that out of the way, that wraps it up on the video for the new and improved Viessa. She now boasts 100% crit rate, hits like an actual snowplow. I'm loving her more than I used to, and I was already really enjoying playing her before. I've got to say, these new power bumps to Descendants as we go really do help to keep the game fresh and truly end up being a breath of fresh air. Hopefully we'll see more Descendants getting this type of treatment as we go, so no single one is starting to get left behind due to power creep. You should be able to play who you want, and you should be able to enjoy playing them as you do. But this is the section I want to hear from you. How are you finding Season 2 so far? Did you have Viessa being meta on your bingo card? And lastly, who's tried out the new Smithereen shotgun? It's feeling pretty good right now, I think. Let me know all that and more down below. Massive thank you for making your way to the end of the video, and as I always say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on the next video.